Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 6 of season 5 of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I'm the founder, producer, and host for the series. So, y'all, I have to apologize. So, we're starting 9 minutes late. For folks who have been following me for a minute, I love to have some time to talk with my guests before bringing them on. And today's guest and I, we were cuckoo kiki in a little bit. And I'm like, and I was like, wait, I can't. I'm getting into this pattern of being late, but just know that I am showering our guests with love before I bring them on. So I am very excited to welcome today's guest. She's someone I've been following on Instagram for quite some time. I was looking for an opportunity to have them on the podcast, and today is today. She published a book earlier this year. She announced it on Instagram, and I was like, oh my God, I can finally have you on. So, yes. So, let's get today's conversation started. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind the scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted almost 70 authors representing 10 plus genres from 5 countries and 18 states. Our platform includes the live stream interviews, the audio podcasts, book clubs, and curriculum development assistance. Find us online at blackwritersread.com. Today, we welcome Nathan Alexander Moore. Nathan Alexander Moore is a Black non-binary transfemme writer, cultural theorist, and educator. Currently, she is the Assistant Professor of Black, Trans, and Queer Studies in the Department of Women and Gender Studies at University of Colorado Boulder. Her research explores Black transfemininity, speculative fictions, and temporality. Their previous work has been published in TransNarratives, scholarly and creative works on transgender experience, Transgender Studies Quarterly, and Departures in Critical Qualitative Research. Their fiction was a semifinalist for the 2021 Screencraft Cinematic Book Competition, as well as shortlisted for the 2022 Santa Fe Writers Project Literary Award. They were also a 2023 Lambda Literary Fellow in Poetry. Her debut fiction collection, The Rupture Files, is available from Hajar Press, and we'll be talking about that book today. Across multiple worlds and upheaval, a curious cast of Black queer characters must choose between what they already know themselves to be and what they might yet become in I'm gonna mispronounce this word, catechism. A shapeshifter learns to embrace their body as it changes through a lunar cycle. A stranger's visit disturbs 3 sisters sheltering from monsters that stalk the land. An archivist hears an irresistible call to the rising ocean as she uncovers a surprising history. A mysterious fire sparks whispers of revolution in the mind of a vampire's captive consort. At once tender and audacious, Nathan Alexander Moore's debut collection tells the stories of extraordinary creatures making impossible but human decisions. Transversing apocalypses, both big and small, these captivating tales vibrate with the tensions between loss and growth, self and community, precarity and possibility. To learn more about Nathan and her body of work, please visit nathanalexandermoore.com. During our conversation, I will, and also when she's reading, I will be sharing the link to her website and also to her Instagram. For those who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format of our show. Nathan will read an excerpt from the Rupture Files. We will then chat. If time remains at the end of our conversation, we'll open it up to Q&A for those who are joining us today. We have viewers joining us from both Facebook and YouTube. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comment section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will compile the questions and either pose them to our guest following our conversation or insert them during an appropriate time within our chat. I'd now like to welcome Nathan Alexander Moore to the virtual stage. Hello.
Hello, hello. It's so good to see you, Nicole. Yeah, I looked down at my phone. I was like, oh, we really went over. Like, we're supposed to be on the stream now. But like I just was like, okay, this is such a good preview of what's gonna happen. Yeah, thank you for that illustrious, beautiful intro. Hearing it back, I was like, wow, who is she? She's
Yes!
I was like, who is that? I was like, oh my God. But it me. I just want to first off start by thanking you, Nicole, for supporting me and my work and just Black writers in general. It's so important. it stays being important. It's important at this moment. It'll be important in the next. It's been important in the past. Um, so yeah, I'm just really honored to be here and super excited. So I guess I'll just dive in.
Yeah, which I have to say, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that you posted that your book was published earlier this year, I was like, yes, I can have her on the podcast. You have no idea how excited I was for that moment. So.
Oh, thank you. That's really touching. It's really beautiful to see like the work out in the world and who it touches and now the conversations that can be had. So yeah, no, I've respected you for a while too, and the podcast and just all that you're doing. And I'm just like, wow, this is really, really dope. So like, yeah, all I can imagine as an artist is to be dope with other dope people. And clearly that's like what time we're on today. So I'm just so grateful and so thankful and so, so excited.
Yay! So I guess I'll turn it over to you to read. Happy reading.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Hello. Thank you all for being here. It's super lovely that we're all in this space together. I'm going to read a kind of brief snippet from the second story, A Crescent Cracking. And all you need to know is it's about a Black transmasculine werewolf and it follows a lunar cycle. So you'll hear in sections me like just say the title or the reference point of like a phase of the moon. And that's just what this is. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to dive in. Waning gibbous. Your father is furious with you when you come home smelling like every last drop of night. You imagine the scent of the stars must pierce his nostrils like silvered shrapnel. You can't help but smile even as his voice is a roar, one that thunders down into your chest, murmuring to your own heartbeat. You say nothing because you know he is right. You should not have been out all night. You should have been with your mother. You have a duty to the one who poured you out of herself. His words swirl around the room, flittering like birds. The feathered edges of his sentences sharp, but not yet enough to draw blood. You open your mouth to speak, but only taste the wilderness of the previous hours. I'm sorry, you say, and even this scrap of sentence is exhausting to conjure. The weight of the night comes crushing down upon you, and suddenly you are full and sleepy and being swept away. She would be so ashamed if she saw you now. For her sake, I'm glad she's so out of it. These words stick, landing with the weight of galaxies. As soon as they have left his mouth, he regrets them. You can see the disdain play across his face. You know your father loves you, even if he misplaces his affections, which is quite now often. You can usually still feel the afterglow of their steady cinders, but right now he is too embarrassed to speak. At least this is what you hope. That shame has made steel of his mouth, yet he does not turn back his words upon themselves. Perhaps it is easier to choose silence over reconciliation. You feel the distance now, the one whose growth you have consistently denied. It's spreading, and now the expanse feels impassable. As you turn and make your way up the stairs, you wonder what litter will begin to fill up this void. Crumbling apologies, discarded approaches, festering compromises. You take one step after another, imagining it piling up, slowly filling the sky until it's all you see, until you remember nothing before the ruin has set in. Third quarter moon. You feel unsettled, like the edges of you are being pulled taut, rebellious at the thought of staying still. You can't remember what happened the other night, but you can feel that you are no longer as you were. Your father is doing his best to play nice, in front of your mother at least. You have both become so accustomed to playing your roles. It's easier to slip into artifice than dare to deal with the real thing. You already feel shaken and tender under the skin, so opening up might risk the contents of you spilling right on out. You do what's familiar, even if it might kill you. You sit around your mother's hospital room, choking back tears and swallowing the taste of sterile decay. She rarely speaks now, the act of shaping air into language seeming too much to be arduous. She just smiles, and when she manages to talk, she asks simply and heavily, "So, what's going on with you?" And you feel what's come undone inside of you begin to shiver, a sweet and sharp tingle like a laughter made of razor blades. You open your mouth and try to sculpt this feeling into words. I'm scared. Nothing seems certain right now, and everything familiar seems like a cruel joke. She nods. reaches out and places her hand's skeletal remnant over yours. She takes in a deep breath, one that should billow her chest into fullness, but only manages to make the miniature rib cage, the miniature bird cage of her ribs creak. She opens her mouth to speak, but only coughs, hacks and hacks and hacks, like she's unraveling some dreaded knots from the depths of herself. You offer her water, but she only sips and swallows with a grimace. It takes a full minute of silence for her body to regretfully acquiesce to speech. Nothing's going to be the same after any of this, and I'm sorry. I wish I knew what to tell you, but I've never done any of this before either. You feel the sentence hanging in the air between you, unfinished and unsatisfying. You stare at the moonlight glinting through the window, trying to recognize the contours of what is being left unsaid in the space above her bed. You're going to have to find a new way to get yourself through this. You're going to have to find some new version of yourself. She closes her eyes, refusing to register the shock she has just sent through your nervous system, or maybe she simply doesn't care. You wait 2 hours for her to wake up and finish her proclamations. First, you think she is finally gone, left you and her body in the same state, empty. But you watch the almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest, only sleeping, only playing at dead. You wait. The fury you feel at the accuracy of her words only deepens. It washes over the new and aching parts of you. The dying have no need to worry over those still living and all our intricate woundings, you realize. With this thought, you leave, swiftly and stained with sorrow. The automatic doors that have just parted with their elegant artificiality. The night is crisp and shining and smells of something burnt. Whether it's the scent of your heart or motor oil, you cannot tell. The whole city feels and looks halved, part warm, part cold, all half shadow and semi-light. That's how you see them when they approach. They are halfway between the luminescence of an 11 o'clock city street and the swallowing shadows of an alley, but their eyes burn bright, reflective and simmering with a constant flame. You begin to wonder if your own pupils now do the same. Have they stoked these embers deep inside you, and do you now brightly churn? Your question is left unanswered as they turn back towards the dark of the passage. First, the one in the center, the one standing on the membrane separating darkness from light, the one whose hair you can just make out as a platinum shock atop their head. They turn, this silvered one, and the rest follow, and then you too do the same. You spend the rest of the night gloriously running, following but charging ahead, sprinting hard until you are sure it is you cutting through the wind. The newness fully awakens in you. It was fitful before, tossing and turning in an unrestful slumber, but now it stands, stretching itself out, unafraid and aching to be tested. You follow as the pack leaps over dumpsters, sprints through traffic, slides over cars with a slickness like rain, scales the brick facade of apartments, and you follow, your body equal parts rage and ecstasy, hungering to turn itself inside out. You only stop when you reach a rooftop and you are laid out, panting and sweating and laughing. It's been so damn long since you've laughed that you almost feel ashamed. Ashamed at having denied yourself and at having forgotten this feeling. Ashamed that you are even enjoying yourself at all. The sharp, familiar pang of this realization makes you turn to your side, away from these new comrades, away from the light. A hand rests on your shoulder, firm, warm, and welcomed. Never feel ashamed of what you are. We are terribly and wonderfully made. You roll over, turning towards the words and the one who said them, looking for answers that you hope won't be denied. They respond to the question that shines from the worried flesh of your face. We are lupine, we are your family, and we've been looking for you. A low, deep sound moves through them. Something that one might mistake for a snicker grows into a snarl, cascading from one throat until it touches another and another and another. A storm cloud of sound that you feel cresting inside of you as well. You open your mouth before you know what you're doing, feeling only the rightness of the act. And then there's only the howl, shared and ragged, blossoming into the night air. Thank you.
One of the things as you were reading, I had a question about, do you have any music training? Because one, you're a poet, but like there's like a rhythmic like nature in your words. And I literally like you could write a libretto for an opera. Like I'm dead serious. Like just the phrasing and the imagery that you give, and I'm just like, oh my God. So thank you.
No, I didn't have any musical
Oh, I can't
training.
hear you. Oh no.
Can you hear me? I don't have. Can you hear me now?
No, I still can't hear you. I'm so sorry. What just happened?
We'll get this together. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
No, I still can't hear you.
How about now?
I am so sorry. Okay, for some reason guests can hear, but I can't hear. Hold on, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, fix it. It's fine. We got all the time in the world. Now I can't hear you.
Okay, I think I'm still having sound issues. Okay. I'm okay. Everyone, I'm gonna have to end the stream and
Can you hear
start.
me now? Because my
There we
mic.
go.
That was this time. That was on me. My mic was muted because I was like, it just feels weird.
I've
But you
never
good?
had. I'm so sorry. I've never had this happen before. And then also, folks, StreamYard has fucked with me multiple times, and I pay a whole lot for this platform. I am looking to switch. I pay almost $500, and this has fucked with me again. So I'm just like,
We finna like co-write a strongly worded letter.
I am so sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, like that's like the thing though. Like technical difficulties are going technical difficulty when you're not in the real. I just take it as like it's just so much good energy. Like the technology ain't ready. That's how I'm reading it. it. That's like my critical interpretation.
Thank you, ma'am, so much for going with the flow because I was just like, this is net where like I couldn't hear you and then I couldn't get back on. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I especially appreciate your patience. I was just like, what the fuck?
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Oh, okay. I think the world, just the universe, because it was like we've had so much beautiful energy today. So I'm just like,
Listen, calm down.
and everyone who is still here, thank you so much for still being here. So what was happening, I couldn't hear Nathan at all. And I froze and then I could not get back on the stream. So thank you all so much for still being here. So the first question that I have for you today is I'd love to start off the conversation by hearing the origin story of the Rupture Files. Why this collection of fiction at this time? And then, which I love the title, and then why the title?
Okay, so the origin story. Ooh, this is like talk about nerdy shit. Like I love superheroes. I love a good origin story. Also, a bitch that love mess. Like tell me the details. I love it.
Yay!
So very much the same way that this kind of event happened. It was just kind of a blessed connection that happened at the right time. So in 2021, I gave a presentation with an amazing organization called Black Women Radicals. I hope most people on the call know that organization, know Jamie Swift and the amazing work she's doing. But if not, please go follow them now. But I was asked to do a teach-in. I presented some of my work, a portion of my dissertation chapter, which was about Black speculative fiction, race and the genre, and ideas of dystopia, and specifically the idea of the Anthropocene, like what we're going through now, climate change, climate collapse, and what does Blackness have to say about that that perhaps we don't talk about in the mainstream ways that is discussed. So I did the presentation. It was a really great, beautiful time. It's still kind of one of the highlights of my very early career that I'm still, emerging into. And luckily, the editors from Hajar Press had saw that presentation, and they were just like, it's very clear that you like love this genre. Do you also write fiction? We're trying to do a debut speculative fiction collection. Is that something you would be interested in? And I was like, would I be interested in it? But of course. So then as I was doing the book proposal and showing them what my ideas were, I just kind of decided to stick with the same themes as the presentation just to, continue that conversation, but in a different way. So I was really inspired by Jemison's work, but also was thinking about, okay, what kind of disasters or apocalypses or dystopias would I want to involve myself in or wander through with these characters? And it just became, these four stories became the most interesting to me. They were the most immediate, where I was like, I know I want each story to focus on a different kind of supernatural creature, a different kind of dystopia, a different moment of tension and pressure and change and possibility. And the Rupture Files came as a title because I was just like, what are these books documenting other than like rupture, something that's pulling apart or that's been pulled apart, and like what's come after that kind of wounding and transformation and rending. And then it became, the titular story was about, there's an event in that world called the rupture, and they're all trying to kind of cobble together a life post that event. So for me, it was just kind of like connecting all of those threads. And then on a more personal note, that year for me was about a lot of change. When I finally submitted the book proposal and it got approved, it was early 2022. I was in the last year, the last semester of my PhD program. I had just started my hormonal transition and that part of myself. I was in the last year of my 20s. I was 29. And then, I was ending this kind of version of myself as a student and moving towards this version of myself as a professor. So there was just so much change. And for all of the Zodiac girlies, it was my Saturn return. And if y'all know what that means, y'all know what that means. It's like the definitive part of your lifetime where Saturn is at the same place in your chart where it was when you were born. So it's about moving from childhood into adulthood. So there was like so much change in the air for me. And like I had just spent the last 2 years of my dissertation inside in quarantine. So the world was drastically different. I was drastically different. Things were changing. And I was just like, what better way to be an emotional ass Pisces than to like make art about it? And it was really like sitting with that while also sitting with, the fact that um, discussions about the world being drastically different and it not being the same as we thought it would be. And basically understanding that from this point forward in my life, I would be dealing with a world that was rapidly changing, crumbling, collapsing. How did I just want to do that? And like, what could these characters make me think and feel about that reality? So writing that book at that time for me was about all of the changes I was going through, but also all of the changes that we're still seeing and feeling in the world, right? That this world isn't post-COVID, we're just post-quarantine. And yeah, I was just trying to grapple with all of that while also, talking to like monstrous people who also have really good hearts, and thinking about the world is different. What are the new choices you're going to make? What is this new world going to ask of you? And for me myself, like, what is this next phase of my life going to mean for me? And luckily, I think the answer to this is like this event, like things like this, being more out in the world, sharing more of myself and my work, and being like a lot braver and more courageous because a bitch is a homebody, really. Like I be in my house. So yeah, it was a beautiful culmination of so many things that I think I needed to work through and think through, and also just having the chance to just write the weirdest, blackest, queerest, gayest, magically shit I could. Like I couldn't pass up that opportunity.
Yeah, see, I was like, yes, I need to have her on. And I'm and I'm gonna plug back in the comment that I made before the lovely world of the broadcast started fucking up. And like, I'm not saying that operas are apocalyptic, but in terms of like just worlds colliding and also just how lyrics narrate so much. Like I'm like, I would love to see this even as a libretto for an opera. Just the way in which
Mhm.
you are able, like, and I hope that you teach creative writing at some point. But just the way that you're able to illustrate the story through imagery and metaphors, and also, and this leads into the next question in terms of time. And now hearing a little bit about your writing process and where you were, both in life and time, it explains how the theme of time kind of shows up throughout the book. Like there's just this interesting ritualistic pacing, especially with the first story. And I forgot the character's name already. And in the first story where she's working on a ship
Mhm.
and you have and I was like, okay, is she a monk? And like doing the burials and things like that. So this leads into my next question. Um, the themes that emerge in the Rupture Files, particularly death and time,
Mm.
especially time, like just like the pacing is just so, and like it literally feels like I'm watching a film and I'm watching a long shot of someone just walking down a hallway for like 20 minutes, but within that we get so much interiority of the character. So um in terms of the themes, can you share why these particular themes of death and time, and then share some of the other themes that will emerge throughout each of the stories?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So death and time. I think both of those are tied just to the particularities of writing post-apocalyptic slash and or dystopian fiction, is that those genres specifically are about kind of the loss of a former world, the loss of a former self, the advent of a new era and a new age, and new not always being positive, being good. So death and time, I think for me, were a lot about just, okay, I'm writing about dystopias, I'm writing about endings. And if we're talking about death and time, if this was to be like a fun kind of language equation, like death plus time equals grief to me, right? So a lot of these characters are grieving in very real ways. Some of them remember what life was like before whatever monumental event pushed the world into full on collapse. And some of them have lost things very personally to them, and usually it's someone close to them, like a loved one. So I think that kind of moves into my answer for your next question is other themes. So definitely grief is a theme, family is a theme, intimacy is a theme, the self and self-conception is a theme. Um, and courage. I think courage is a theme. I tried to think about what each of these worlds would ask of a person living through it, and also a person living through it with, some level of integrity. A person who a lot of them are like imperfect, so they may fuck up, but they at least want to try to be a good person. They at least want to try. They want to make that attempt, right? So what would that attempt look like? And for a lot of them, it's being really courageous, and doing the thing, even though they may be scared of doing the thing, which was also like a big portion for me of like, I'm gonna do this thing. Like I'm gonna finish my dissertation. I'm going to defend it. I'm going to apply for jobs. Um, I'm going to move into this next phase of my life that I really don't have a personal model for. Like I know what it's like to teach as a grad student, but I don't know what it's like when I'm the professor, when I'm the one mostly steering the ship, right? And as a writer, like I know what it's like to craft little poems, and like I did a chapbook before this was a collection of small poems, but like this is my first fiction debut. And the whole time writing this, I think I was just as scared and uncertain as the characters about what this work would be, and what it would do and who would read it, if anyone, outside of me and my friends, who I know are definitely on the call because they were texting me during the technical difficulties thing. And I was like, oh my God, is it just gonna be me and my homies, whom I love with all my heart, but like who else is gonna read this book? Who else is gonna touch? So like being scared and having the courage to do the thing while scared, um, is a big part of the book, in terms of the choices these characters make and how they grapple with the self that they know they are and the self that they can't deny they're becoming. Right. So those for me are the themes of the book. And I think, yeah, a lot of it revolves around time and change. And like really the question a lot of the characters ask is like, what type of time are we on? Like what is going on right now? What am I going to do? What am I going to be? Right. So for me, those are the ones I can point to that kind of touch across the text. Um, yeah, and were really important for me now that it's like done and finished out in the world, but also while I was writing it.
Nice. And this leads so beautifully into the next question. The role of the narrator helps the reader navigate the journeys of the characters. One of the things that I love and admire about A Crescent Cracking, which is the story that you share with us today, in particular, is the way you use metaphors and imagery to illustrate the experience that the protagonist is undergoing. I'd love to know why use this particular storytelling device in terms of the witnessing through the eyes of the narrator, and what subjectivity does it allow your characters?
Mm, that's a good question. That's like a big, juicy question. So in terms of each story, I always feel like, in a way, I love that you said like the walking down the hallway. I feel like I'm on a journey with this character. Like I feel like I've asked them into the room, or I've opened the door and I say like, "Hey, what's going on over there?" And they like pull me into the room and just pull me along with them. So for me, there's a technical point of like, okay, I know I want to tell a story about a trans masculine werewolf person, right? But then I'm when I'm thinking about structure and form and metaphor, and particularly with that story, the idea of the full moon and the lunar cycle was really interesting because I'm like, that kind of grounds us in the world. That feels like the most accurate container for a story from this fictional landscape. So it's really about whatever stylistic choices or whatever like formal manipulations or kind of like whatever metaphorical language comes up is all in service to really grounding myself and the reader in this story and in this character's perspective, right? So it's about kind of like what is the best container for this. I was asked a similar question about like form and the metaphors in this work, and I said for me it kind of feels almost like archival, right? So what is the trace? What is the document? What is the artifact that this story is, right? And how is it going to take shape that feels most authentic and true to this world, right? So the stylistic weirdness and like the metaphorical, I guess, audaciousness. It's not about me just like trying to flex or just be weird on purpose for no reason. It's really about thinking about and being in service to these worlds and these characters to where like the lunar cycle felt so key for that because like that's a month, that's a way to keep time. And also just thinking about like we don't think about a month as a long portion of time, but it's 4 to 5 weeks of our lives, and it's like one lunar cycle, it's one, you know, kind of certain kind of rotation. So I wanted to think about that as like a way of keeping time, a way of being honest to this character and this world, and just to also keep myself on track and kind of like rein myself in because like the story could have kept going and kept going, kept going. But I was like, no, by the time we get to the next full moon, it's over. And one of the beautiful parts of having really amazing editors like the ones at Hajar are I went from full moon to full moon again. And they were just like, actually, we don't think we need this. They were like, this is beautiful, but I don't think we need like this full moon. So we end on the phase of the lunar cycle right before the moon is full again, but where he's made this choice, right, or has been forced to under these conditions make certain kinds of situational choices. So for me, it's about what form is best serving the story, what kind of language is best serving these characters in the story. So for me, that is why I have chosen not even like choosing to, but just like kind of just deciding to go with whatever the flow of the story was and trusting that the characters will take me to the other side. Because for me as a writer, I always have like building these stories. It was always like a what if. It was like, okay, so what if this happens? And then for me, I always kind of had like a next answer. It's like, okay, this would probably happen. That becomes like the beginning and the ending. But the middle is just all adventure. It's all just like, okay, how do we get here? And the journey that we take, the path that takes, the form that takes is the metaphors, the stylistic choices, the formal manipulations of the text. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I went about it. But it was really just kind of like trusting whatever like the intensity and the vibe of the story was, and then thinking about, okay, so what kind of is the best container for this energy?
And also, too, the other thing I love about the subjectivity and the journey that you take us on with the characters is just allowing us to go with the characters, especially given the queerness of these stories, that I love even more. So thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think I'm grateful. It sounds really like maybe a little too weird and hippy dippy, but I'm glad that these stories chose me to be their transcriber. I really like trust the characters in a certain type of way, and really only become kind of critical of them in the editing process. But like the first drafting, it's just like, yeah, girl, tell me all of the things, tell me all the things, and then then we'll kind of decide, is this something I need to know as the author that informs, you know, the character's voice and their mannerisms and their movement through the world, or is it something that the audience needs to know as like a very important and vital part of the story? So Yeah, I'm just as grateful that that these voices came the way they came and shared themselves with me.
Nice. I'm glad they knocked on your door.
Yeah, I'm glad they stuck around long enough for me to like get my shit together to finally sit down and write. For me, I'm a writer where it takes a really long time to go from like the idea and the conception to like writing it. So for me, I had when I submitted the book proposal, I was like, okay, these are the four stories, these are the four worlds that we're gonna deal with. I didn't know all the characters' names. I didn't quite know what their journey was gonna look like. And that was at the top of 2022, so like early January, like right before the semester started. And then I didn't start writing these stories till I was here in Colorado at this new job, at this new space. So that was in August. So it took me like a full like 7 to 8 months to really um, trust that I knew enough of these characters and their voice was clear enough and real enough and natural enough for me to like listen in and record what was being said. But like, yeah, I'm glad they stayed. I'm glad they stayed around for those 8 months and just put up with me, like being like, not right now, not right now, babe, like not right now. Like, mama's busy and she's stressing and she don't quite know what she's doing. But like, I promise you, I'll come back.
Yes. So, along the lines about metaphor, imagery, and the vivid descriptions of what the characters are experiencing, it allowed me, and I hope it will for other readers as well, the opportunity to truly embody each character's experience. Can you talk about a little bit more about how you developed your characters and also the rationale a little bit more
Mm.
behind gifting the readers this particular type of experience? Because I'm like, y'all, the pacing and the time and just the vivid descriptions, it's a technique that you use throughout the entire book.
Yeah, okay. So for me, I'm like a very structural thinker. Even when I'm writing like criticism or some form of theory, I need to think about the like larger structure, the skeleton of it before we get like deep down into like the flesh and the marrow and the meat and the guts and the blood and all of those things. Clearly it's post spooky season because I'm talking like this.
Yes!
I've been watching a lot of horror, guys. A lot of horror. So like, excuse me if it's a little gory. But like, I think about first. I thought about the world. The world was the biggest. What if? So for the third story, Ashes for Your Beauty, I was thinking about. I want to write about like a nuclear apocalypse, like a nuclear winter. There's no more sunlight, right? What kind of creature is going to rule that world? And I was like, oh, a vampire. They would be so petty as to like seize that opportunity to be like, haha, bitch, we on top now. Suck my, you know.
Yes!
Or let them suck your anyway.
Right!
So I was thinking about, I thought about the larger structure of the world. I'm like, what has changed? What has pivoted? What has crumbled? What's the new normal, right? And then to think about, okay, how is someone going to move through that new normal? And for me, with that story, Amaya became a really interesting character because she was super duper close to these new creatures that are ruling the world. So it became about what could be an interesting story, maybe not even the most interesting story, but an interesting story to tell from this world. And if I'm going to think about, okay, what is this world? Then what is the person in this world? Then like, how are those larger structural conditions um, really shaping who this person is and their interiority, right? What kind of thoughts would they think? What would they say about themselves and others? How would they conceive of community? Would they even conceive of community? And there's a line in that first story where she's like, there's a difference between those of us who were born after the bombs and those who were born before, because some of us remember, and there's a heavy grief about us, as opposed to people who this is just their normal, right? So thinking about like what do these conditions do to people? What do they ask of them? What do they demand of them? And particularly for Amaya in that third story, it's about a kind of self-denial, a kind of lessening of the self, or a withering of the self, because like the most important thing that she can do to keep herself in some form of stability, even though she at the start of the story conceives it as safety, right? Or a certain type of safety, is to be the property slash lover slash pet of a vampire. And then what do those conditions ask of you? Like what would you have to do to make it through one day, 30 days, a year, 2 years, a decade? Like what kind of changes would have had to been made? What kind of things would you had to accept or ignore or deny, to move through that kind of world and to survive not only that world but those conditions of survival? Like what does making a living for yourself look like in those situations? So for me, yeah, I really was thinking about from the top down, here is the structure, here's the problems, and then, okay, how do we explore and navigate those things through a person whose voice is evocative and interesting and immediate? And the easiest way to do that is to really lock in on very human, very personal experiences. So I didn't want to write the second story, A Crescent Cracking, and have the lycanthropy, the werewolfism only be a metaphor for transness. I was like, no, he is trans and he is a werewolf, and he's trying to figure out what it means to be masculine, what it means to be a man, if he even understands that he's a man or what manhood is. Like all of these changes are happening at the same time, right? And if you center it on something real and on something that feels honest, then it's easier also for your readers to accept that, okay, there's vampires and there's people who turn into invisible balls of fire, and okay, there's werewolves and witches and mermaids and monsters. If I'm centering it on a person at the end of the day, like a person full of all their beautiful flaws and contradictions and um, thoughts and feelings and reactions, if I center it on a person, then it's easier for all of the other things to come through. And also, if I center it on a person and they believe the world as it is and all of its like weirdness and peculiarity, then it's going to be easier for my reader. So that's the way in which I was trying to listen to these characters and preserve their voice, and really honor this kind of like journey that they're taking us all on through these stories.
The Rupture Files includes a playlist at the beginning of the book. Can you share with us how you curated this list, why these particular songs, and how you would like for readers to engage with these songs? Which there's a couple of the stories that weave in some of these songs.
Yeah, so it was something that was asked of me or presented to me by Hajar Press to say that, like, oh, a lot of our authors make playlists for their books. If you want to, that's an option. It's something we do, but you don't have to. And originally I was like, girl, I'm writing these stories. I ain't got time to make no damn playlist. Like, let me do the one job I said I was gonna do, which was write. But what it ended up happening is like, I ended up preemptively thinking about, okay, what stories would go here? So there's songs on that playlist that were on that playlist before I started writing, and then there were a lot of songs that were put on that playlist while I was writing, and then some songs that were put on that playlist after I was done writing. Um, and because again, I don't got no formal musical training. A girl is not a DJ, a composer, or nothing. She just like what she like when she like it, how she like it. Okay. Um, so for me, the simplest way to like do the playlist was just to start with the beginning of the first story and then end with the ending of the last story. So in that way, I wanted readers to get, like, if they listen to the whole playlist all the way through, they could get a vibe of the whole journey of where each story goes, and also how they fit, like, and how they bump up or rub up against each other in a certain type of way. And I did my best. to make sure like the ending of one song kind of flowed into another in an interesting way, not only between the songs that are for each story, but like the songs that are kind of like on the buffer of each story. So yeah, the playlist is about 3 to 4 songs for each story. So like the first 3 songs are the first story. So yeah, if you were to listen to it all the way through, you kind of get the arc of the whole book and each section. But like I would also think it would be cool if people just like hit shuffle and like listen to it as however it pops up, the way you can go back to a collection once you've read it and kind of read it out of order and pick your favorite story first, or come back to the story that maybe you thought you didn't like as much and see what it is. Or yeah, just like turn it on and just listen to it all the way through as you read a single story. That's what my sister said she's been doing. And she was like, it's been so interesting because I know, like you said, they're separate, but there's a recurrence here. And I tried to, in the stories, have them be different, but also like hit similar themes. I think everybody in the book has mama issues, whether they are a mother or are just a daughter or a child. You know, everyone is kind of like beefing with their parents, so it's very like millennial in that way.
Yes.
Like they're just reckoning with the fact that like, damn, my parents are people, and sometimes they have made quite monumental mistakes. But there's also like they're a little, every story is a little spicy, a little sexy. Every story is a little violent. There's always, you know, some big, cool, magical moments that happen. So I wanted there to be enough resonances where they felt like, you know, that they were cousins, not exactly like sisters or siblings. And I hope that like that vibe is also in the playlist. What I want folks to do is like listen to it, see if you vibe with it, and then like, you know, read the stories alongside of it. That's all I want. And however you listen to it, front to back to front, on shuffle, piecemeal here and there, like whatever, however you want to include it. It was just another interesting way to think about, again, documenting, archiving, finding artifacts for these stories. And it was a challenge, but now I think it might be a really interesting practice as I do other works, to think about what is the sonic landscape, like what would these characters like. A lot of the songs were picked because I was like, I think the characters would like this. I think it both speaks to the themes and the events of the story, but I also think the characters would all vibe with this, and they're all like kind of moody, kind of sad girl, but also I feel like just bops. And that's very much the book. Like there's grief, there's sadness, there's yearning, but also just like these characters are badass, and I love them for being all of who they are, like in all of their fullness and their roundness and their complexity.
Yes. So I mentioned before we got on air that you are my first speculative fiction author.
What an honor!
And so I'm about to learn a lot right now because this is a genre I'm learning about. So speaking of, I would love for you to share some insight on the genre. What are some of its possibilities and challenges? What draws you to the genre, and how is it writing in this genre, giving your intersecting identities?
Yeah. So on the image that you posted for the promo for the poster, it like named all of like the different genres that I work through, and for me, they all feel like different languages, but in a way, writer wise and narratively, speculative fiction kind of feels like my mother tongue. Um, you know, in terms of like the storytelling I was exposed to really young, like I was a child of the 90s. I was literally born the same year that like OG Mighty Morphin Power Rangers dropped. Like,
Yes.
yeah, like the world was very gay at that point, and they made superheroes that were the color of the rainbow. Like, oh my God, gaggy. But like in terms of like that being one of the first storytelling devices, I was like, oh, superheroes. And it even took me a while to realize that like Power Rangers were superheroes, but like they totally are, right? And the first film that I remember watching in theaters is 2000's X-Men. And like seeing Storm levitate and throw around lightning, even in that terrible ass wig and that wild ass accent,
Yes.
was a moment. And to see Mystique to see Mystique just be like, it's people like you that were the reason I was afraid to go to school as a child, and she beat him up with just her feats. Like, iconic. Like, changing into Wolverine and beating his ass. Like, Wolverine was the whole hero of that story, and Mystique was like, bitch, I don't even got on a bra or shoes or underwear, and I'm gonna whoop that ass. Like, iconic. Love it for her. And then to think about the first story, the first like book that I read from cover to cover was a Goosebumps book, which was also very 90s and very like of the moment. So I think I was just inundated in a way to think about stories where it was like people, real, regular people in extraordinary circumstances, in terrifying events and moments, in really weird and funky and strange things. And like the series that like I really read and like dived into, especially in middle school, was like, um, oh, the Animorphs. Like, you know, them ugly ass covers, but those fun ass pages that shifted and flipped them, you know? So, like, for me, it was the way to think about storytelling because it was like nothing was impossible. At least that's how I first saw it. But now, you know, on the other side, as a writer, you do see the limitations and you realize that, like most limitations, they're like very arbitrary, right? Um, Historically, canonically, right? The canon is usually about um, bored ass, weird ass white men writing about other bored ass, weird ass white men, right? And that doesn't mean they're not important, but there's ways in which like we can imagine like elves and dragons and ringwraiths and aliens and androids, but we can't imagine a Black person that's not a magical Negro, right? Like we can't imagine that. Stephen King, who is amazing, right? But all of his Black people are wildly problematic, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of like other like big names like H.P. Lovecraft, right? Can imagine all of the cosmic terror and the horror, but like he's also most scared of like Black people. Like all of his horror about the universe is also his horror of bumping up against Blackness, right? So there's ways in which I see the limitations now as someone who is a writer, but also who studied this in the way in which like um, the limit was always that we weren't imagined to be the center. We weren't imagined to have stories. We weren't imagined to have the complexity, the worth, the interest of being center stage. So for me, the limits are always external because like for me, um, the people I center in this text are like Black women and femmes and Black queer folk who, to me, have shown me what courage is, have shown me what beauty is, have shown me what family is. So I'm just like, oh, there's nothing we can't do, and also we also have a richness of our own, particularly in like the first story. It's about what does this particular supernatural mythic figure look like if it's centered on like a Black African diasporic history. Um, so for me, it was about really reminding myself that one, this is a genre where anything is possible, and two, the people you love, the people closest to you, are the most extraordinary, supernatural, magical beings. So just write about them. So yeah, I think that answered all your questions. I feel like there was one more that maybe I didn't quite get to, but
Yeah, I think this was amazing, and a couple of things. So, one of the things that I love is, and I'm so glad that this book is so hella motherfucking Black, like brown skin glistening. I can't remember how many times I counted that in the book. I was like, thank you. So they were nicely moisturized. I'm like,
yeah, and it's like also they're visibly Black. You know,
yes.
they're not ambiguous. Like they're Black, and you can see it and you can feel it, and that needs to be centered, right? Because like let's not act like colorism is not an issue, it's not a problem. Like so why not just center it on a Black person who is dark skinned and fine with it and thinks they're beautiful, and also it is the way in which they see the world, like the pinnacle of beauty for a lot of these characters is people that look like them, right? And it's like seeing that is what like makes them feel the most at home, the most beautiful, the most possible. So like yeah, they're Black and they're like specifically brown and dark skinned folk because that's important.
Yeah, and I also love that your formative experiences in the 90s, mine is too, but I'm about to age myself. I'm 45. And so I was a teenager during that time.
Um,
And yeah, and like the 90s was a beautiful moment, not only for like Blackness, but Black feminists, Black like queer experiences, Black community, Black friendships, and also like Black magical worlds and all of these possibilities. And thank you for mentioning Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like just even just that world itself for folks to show up in very particular colors, very particular personalities, very particular ways, and they're all like majestical. I just made up a word, majestical. It's just amazing. So I love that that is your reference point.
yeah, like they had a girl that was named Aisha, and like it wasn't a problem. They were just like, "That's her name. Her name is Aisha," and like low key, Aisha should have been a team leader. Like I don't like Tommy, get out of here. Like you're like you fine as shit, but like you and your goddamn ponytail ain't running things right, sir. Like let Aisha run things because like it'd be at the top of the episode. Aisha was like, "This looked like a problem," and they'd be like, "We'll just let it rock." And then like, there's no way Aisha shouldn't have been like, "So y'all just don't fucking listen." So no one wants to act like I said this, right? But like that's I digress. But like yeah, Aisha is an icon.
I love it. Oh, and you make oh my god, I could be on this all day, but we have more questions. Your writing engages multiple genres, including speculative fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and critical theory. You're also my first academic in a while. How do they speak to and complement one another? And then how do they represent the overall mission of your work?
Ooh, yeah, so for me, I write in multiple genres because I come from a tradition of Black writers that were not scared to challenge themselves and work in multiple genres. Like Toni Morrison worked in multiple genres. James Baldwin wrote in pretty much every damn genre. Zora Neale Hurston wrote in multiple genres. So for me, I do it because when I was coming up, as a writer and coming into my own, I was looking at examples of like really amazing, brilliant, beautiful, inspiring Black people who were just writing in multiple genres. So for me, it was just like, yeah, you can do it because like it's just words, it's just language, it's just putting them on the page in a certain type of way. It's about learning the structure of these things, and then also if you don't want to if you want to play at that, if you want to deconstruct that, if you want to flip that, that's also your right. So to me, yeah, I said like speculative fiction feels like my first language, but also in a way like I'm a polyglot. Like I'll write poetry, I write fiction, I'll write an essay. I would love to get into screenwriting and comic book writing. If you read the book, that makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of
I
sense.
would love to do all of the things because it's just they're all different ways to um, process and disseminate information. So for me, they speak to each other sometimes in like very interesting ways. So when I read a piece of like critical theory and someone's like reading a text or a piece of art or a film or a TV show or even a song, and they were just like, here's, my theoretical framework. A weird part of my brain is always like, how would you narrativize that? Like, how would you turn that into art, or how has the artist that they're talking about turned that into art? What is the process of turning this discourse and this critical language into something that can be more open, or open in a different kind of way? So for me, it's about like, yeah, some people can really fuck with the theory, but some people don't want to read the theory. So like pick up the poems, like pick up the fiction. But they're all from the same family. they all have the same entry point through the world, as in the fact that, like, I definitely feel like the Rupture Files is a sibling to my dissertation. And they're not the same thing, but they're not the same thing. They're not the same kind of person, but they're definitely related. So yeah, when I read theory, sometimes I'm like, how can I narrativize this idea, or how can I make this evocative in artistic format? And then when I'm reading fiction or poetry, I'm like, what is the structure of this? Like, what is the world they're bringing me into? What are the governing principles of this text, this experience, this meeting with language? So for me, it's all about they're interdependent. They're just like different registers. They're different languages of communication. And for me, the mission of my work, and particularly in this era, is to think about the ways in which they don't need to completely be seen as separate. Like, what happens when they hybridize? What happens when they come together? What happens when there's a fusion, a synthesis, or even a tension, a friction between the differences of these forms, right? Which I think is kind of evident in the book, in the ways in which these stories, most of them aren't just like straightforward stories. There's dreams and visions and documents and formal manipulations in weird kind of ways, is to think about what's the synthesis, but I think maybe the best word is what is the symbiosis between these two things? How are they in relationship? So the mission of my work is that these things are distinct, but they're not completely separate. They're not completely severed from each other. And if you're willing to like study and be in like deep thought and care about like craft, then like you can just think about, okay, what is the tool I'm picking up to write a poem, like, right? And even in poetry, what's the tool I pick up when I write a sonnet versus when I write something free form? In fiction, if I'm writing a novel versus a short story, what's the difference in those things? I had to teach myself how to write short stories when I wrote this collection. So for me, in playing with these different genres and these different forms of craft, is really thinking about what is the serviceability of form? What does this form give or allow me to do? What does it allow me to say? What does it dissuade me to say? That baby said, I like that. Thank you, boo boo. So yeah, for me, it's about really thinking about how do these tools serve us, right? In a lot of ways, there are people who only write in one genre and they know it's their genre and they're really committed to it. And in some ways, I think that's like really beautiful to have that kind of like that certainty and that kind of groundedness. But for me, I think just as a person, as someone who's interested in so many different writing forms and genres, but also as a person who themselves is a non-binary person. I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm this particular version of a bitch. The kind of writing style that I'm interested in, or the kind of projects that I'm interested in putting out, are ones that speak to a kind of complexity and hybridity and formalistic strangeness.
Nice. Prior to having, I'm loving this conversation so much. Prior to having our guests on Black Writers Read, we ask each of them why they write. Here's what you wrote. I write because I cannot imagine not writing and being well mentally, physically, or spiritually. For me, writing feels like the best way to not only express what I know, but to share it in a fashion that might allow others to know it too. I think being a writer at this time is both extraordinarily particular and timeless. To be a writer at this time means to not lie, to hone the truth of your experience and share it with a world that is predicated upon and sustained through lies. Oh my God, yes, it is. Being a writer at this time means shifting through the horror without turning away, and more importantly, without it obliterating the urgency and necessity of what survives the brutality. It's important for me to share my work because I can't hold these words and stories and ideas and worlds hostage inside of me. I believe I'm at my bravest and smartest on the page. So if I give the world anything, it might as well be at my best. I know that certain pieces of writing have saved me, have sustained, and I hope in some small way that my words may do that for others. So, with that said, so brilliantly said, how would you like for your work to inform, influence, and direct the canon?
Yeah. So I think on the most base level, I love for stories to do two things: to make me feel and to make me think. So I hope my writing does that, right? I hope it makes people feel a type of way, and I hope it makes them think. And I say it in the acknowledgments at the end. I thank the reader for going on this journey with me, right? And I say, I hope you found something that you needed or that you found purposeful. But also, if you didn't, right? If this isn't the book for you, then I hope it gives you the courage to write the book that you do need. So in that way, I want to influence and direct the canon by expanding it and also realizing that there is no one singular canon. There are canons, and we all build them for ourselves, and they're arbitrary. Even though the canon that we may be taught in school it's important to maybe perhaps learn that, right? Because it has something to say about the history of this form, the history, particularly of perhaps the writers that are on this place, this country, this capitalist company that we call America. It might say something about that, but that there's no one singular canon, and if you don't fit into that, that doesn't mean you don't fit into another canon, right? One of the most important parts for me in my undergrad career was doing an independent study on Afrofuturism with my lovely mentor, Damaris B. Hill, and realizing that, like, just because I wasn't seeing the things I was thinking and imagining doesn't mean someone else hadn't compiled them, doesn't mean there wasn't a canon, right? And then to learn, especially during like the negritude movement and the Black arts movement, that Black people were taking up surrealism to talk about this, right? Um, that there is no one canon, there is no one right way to write, there is no one genre that is better or more important than the other. They're just different. And the complexity of that is holding onto all of this difference without hierarchizing, without making hierarchy. I am um, definitely a mentee and a student of Octavia Butler. And she says in the Xenogenesis trilogy, or what's been now called Lilith's Brood, right, is that the contradiction about humans that the aliens see is that we are extremely intelligent, and on the other hand, really love hierarchical thinking. So we use our intelligence, right, that we can use to build tools and make penicillin and solar panels. We also use that same intellect to create new forms of hierarchy, to
Yeah.
create new forms of oppression and suppression and subjugation. So for me, my work on the bare bones is like, I want you to feel and to think. I hope my work gives you the courage and the inspiration to write whatever you think you need to write or create whatever you think you need to create, because maybe not everyone's a writer, but we've talked a lot about music. So, if you listen to it and you want to create a song, please do that. So for me, it's about spreading a certain kind of wisdom and artistry that has been so important to me and that has changed me. So hopefully it touches others, however that is, right? But also, if we're talking about the canon, then I want to expand the canon. And I also want to, in my work, I never think I'm doing anything new. I always am like thinking about Black people who came before me who did it. So this book was a lot of Jemison, a lot of Octavia Butler, a lot of Randall Keenan, in which it's just like, yeah, just write the weird Black nerdy thing, bitch. Like, just do it, cause why not? Like, who gonna stop you? Um, so it's also about expanding the canon, but also like really being honed into and tapped into and in service to for me, a legacy of Black writing that is imaginative, expansive, honest, powerful, evocative, beautiful, all of the things that make being on this raggedy ass rock really wondrous, beautiful.
And Earth is raggedy as fuck. Like homegirl need a
Raggedy, no,
makeover.
it's raggedy, but like the beauty and the horror of it is like shared together.
Yeah. Lastly, what is next for you, and how can a Black Writers Read community support you on this journey?
So how can you support me? I'm gonna answer the second question first.
Yeah.
Again, because like, why be linear? So how you can support me if you're liking what I'm saying and you feeling it, please buy the book. Please buy multiple copies of the book. Tell other people to read it. Share it. Ask your library to get it. If that's at your school or your public library, ask them to get it. Ask them to order it. Please do. Listen to the playlist. Tell your mama, your aunties, your cousins, and them to read the book. If we just talked about academics and you talked about education, put it on your syllabi. teach,
Yes.
teach the book. I'm shamelessly plugging. Read it. Read it and tell other people to read it. Please do. Because writing is such a personal kind of lonely thing that like to have people read it and to respond to it is always like really beautiful. I don't think anyone knows how impactful it is. And especially like the moment we're having right now is so beautiful and it's really touching and really, really beautiful. The best part about this year has been the book coming out and getting to have conversations with folk around it. Um, so yeah, support the book. And if you want me to come speak and say nerdy, profanity ridden like things, like I'm available. I am available. Please do it. You can find me anywhere. The only other Nathan Alexander more on the internet is some old white man, and that's not me. So clearly, if you don't see this space, it's not me. So support me as you would support any other artist by like buying things, talking to people, sharing the thoughts, inviting me to things. So that's how you can support me. And in terms of what's next and how to support that, just pray.
Oh God.
Because I'm starting a new project, which is again we're talking about like form and style and the canon. I'm starting a new project that I'm calling a theoretical memoir. Like in theory, it's a memoir, but it's also theory and poetry and creative nonfiction. And it's called Osmosis Manual. And I'm writing about Blackness and specifically Black transfemininity and water and history. And I thought the most authentic and real way to do that was to not write about other people's art, although that's in it, but was to write about like myself. Like the only way I can say that I came to these theories and these understandings that I'm making and the arguments that I'm proposing in the book is because of my own personal life. So in this way, I'm saying, hey, these are structural realities, and here's how I've lived through them, worked through them. And to me, that feels like a change that a lot of people are doing stylistically. A lot of people are incorporating what we call audio theory or creative nonfiction, but also is also home to a legacy of audacious, courageous Black feminist writers saying, I understand these structural realities of what it means to live under imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, and here's how I've lived through it, right? So that next book is really real and visceral and vulnerable in a way. Like all of my writing has been a little bit of myself or my experience or my understanding of things. Of course, that's how writing works. But this book is most vulnerable, where I'm just like, it's not a character. It's not me if I was a vampire's property. It's not me as if I was a witch sister. It's literally just me. It's me, my sister, my mama. It's our story, and it's the knowledge I've gained, the wisdom I've gained through that. So in supporting me for this next book, just pray I have the courage to really be as brave and as vulnerable as I need to be in tune with this book. So that's what's coming next, right on the horizon. And then, strangely enough, I've like had a little bit of weird ideas here and there about like short stories, and now I have like 6 to 7. So like maybe there could be another like speculative fiction collection in the future. But for what's closest to us, what's not super far off on the horizon, is that I'm going to be writing kind of like a hybrid memoir of poetry and theory and nonfiction. So just send your girl all her good energy, and maybe a snack, maybe a DoorDash.
Yes!
Like a long day of writing, I don't want to cook.
Send DoorDash, send your lottery winning.
However you can feel materially helpful. But also, I love people just being like, I'm sending you all my love and praying for you, because like I come from a long line of praying ass Black women who know the power of prayer, and I'm slowly but surely like learning to believe them.
Yeah.
Prayers also are very much welcome.
Yes. So, Nathan, it was so beautiful finally having you on. Thank you so much for your words, for your gifts, and for your patience, especially with the fucking technology.
Talking about crumbling and collapse, talking about instability. Yeah, it's like par for the course. It's fine.
I'm just like, oh my God, I appreciate you so much. And thanks also too, I wanted to just shout out. Thank you for existing and wanting to exist and
Mhm.
straddling both the ivory tower and also like for popular reading. Like this means so much to me that you are doing this work.
Thank you so much. And I can only just like believe and receive that, and also send it back. So thank you
Oh,
for really showing up for Black writers, for reading their work thoroughly, and crafting really amazing questions and spaces of conversation, for really honoring people's work, right? I think we live in an age where we are really consumers of culture. And I don't know if that's the best way to take things in, is to chew them up and then shit out our opinions. Like sometimes it takes time, and it takes care, and it takes real intention to really sit with and be with a piece of art, a text, a movie, a TV show, and you really modeled that in the questions you've crafted and in the space that you've created. So I am just as proud and really honored to be in the space, and really grateful that you built this space for us, by us, in
oh,
perpetuity. So yeah, no, the love is so mutual and so real and so appreciated and seen.
thank you. Oh my God. Thank
Wait,
you
the kids
so
don't do that
much.
no more. What do they do to? Yeah.
Yes.
Like, you said 45. I was like, bitch, I'm already an auntie. It's fine, because like I be doing this, and the kids are like, no, like this. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
a little like a whole bunch of my Korean homies do that.
Oh, so great having you on. So I'm gonna do a little bit of wrap up, and then you and I can chat after I wrap up.
Sure.
So thank you so much for joining me for episode 6 of season 5 of Black Writers Read. I'll be back on Saturday, November 16th with our next guest. Support Black Writers Read by subscribing to my YouTube channel, where many of you are joining us from today, or the audio podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you get your catalog of podcasts. Also, feel free to drop a review of Black Writers Read on one of the platforms that you listen to your podcast. By supporting me as a subscriber or reviewer, you're growing the community, which can lead to longer term sustainability for the platform. Please be sure to visit blackwritersread.com to learn more about Black Writers Read and also my work. So thank you all for joining me this afternoon, and more importantly, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. See you in a couple of weeks.